news in the church doesn't usually break on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, rather, unless it's something inflammatory Francis said at an Angelus or during his homily at a Mass or something. But yesterday evening, it was released initially by Lepanto Institute, as far as I can tell, that Cardinal McElroy was getting promoted to the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., in the imperial capital. Cardinal Wilton Gregory is 2 years past retirement age, has been kept on board there by Francis. But once you hit 75 as a bishop of any kind, you submit your resignation letter to the Pope, and he accepts it or does not, depending on various circumstances. Best example of this I can give you actually is from two different bishops. In Argentina, his arch nemesis, Hector Agur, who was the Archbishop of La Plata, which would become now Cardinal Fernandez's diocese before he was brought into the Roman Curia. The day he turned 75, he submitted his letter, and hours later he was dismissed from his post as the Archbishop of La Plata, Argentina. And that goes because he and Francis had decades of battling with each other over heresy and things in the church. On the flip side of that is Cardinal Blase Cupich, who turned 75 in Chicago this past March, and he's still there. He submitted his letter, has met with Francis personally, face-to-face, but he's still there. And there's a number of reasons why a pope may decide to keep somebody around. Political reasons, which I think is what's going on here, but also for just some basic things. So, for instance, if you have a hard time getting bishops to accept a post to being a bishop, if you have a cardinal who's 75 but is in otherwise good health and shows no signs of deteriorating, you keep him around. That would just be logical, unless they're a problem. And for Francis, Cupich is not a problem. But we're not talking about Cupich today. We're talking about Cardinal Wilton Gregory stepping down and Cardinal McElroy taking the post. So Lepanto Institute initially seemed to be the ones who broke the story, but then they rescinded it. And you can, when these stories break as a content creator, rush to whatever your platform is and put out an article or something. These stories always develop, and it was weird when Lepanto pulled it. But then we got this story here from the Washington Post. Again, this is weird that they're taking that big of an interest in this, but the reality of the situation is this. The Cardinal Archbishop of Washington, D.C. is a powerful political figure. So we get this headline. Vatican to name San Diego Cardinal Robert McElroy as new D.C. leader. McElroy, known for a pastoral approach to new arrivals and the James Martin crowd, will take over an archdiocese still bruised by, the McCarrick problems and mismanagement. San Diego is not a diocese. It's not even an archdiocese, okay? But it's not a diocese that has ever had a cardinal before. But Francis politically made this man a cardinal. And my expectation was that because of his stances on the new arrivals and the James Martin crowd, he would be named as Cardinal Cupich's successor. Got a different opinion on that now as we go over this. I suspect you're going to see Dolan replaced soon, because Cardinal Dolan hits retirement age in New York soon, and there's another high-profile archbishop in the country who I think might be getting that post, and y'all have a video for you on that tomorrow. But this article goes on to describe some basic facts here. Cardinal Wilton Gregory is 2 years past the standard retirement age for bishops. He's 77. Bishops retire at 75. And as an aside, even though he has virtually no chance of it happening, as a cardinal, Wilton Gregory can participate in the next papal conclave that will replace Francis, at least until he hits age 80. Now, his chances of being the next pope are near zero, realistically, but maybe somebody should start an internet campaign for Cardinal Wilton Gregory with the slogan of doubling down on heresy. You know anything about Cardinal Wilton Gregory, you know why I say that. Either way, the Washington Post is framing this as an issue of politics. They bring in the incoming president into the story and basically say that McElroy will be leading the American Catholic resistance to his agenda, when in reality, the incoming president won the votes of Catholics. But either way, his position in Washington will give Francis enormous influence with those politicians resisting the agenda to restore American greatness. That's the truth of this. He is being in there for at least partially for political reasons. Now, it's also worth noting here, McElroy is not all that young himself, which is why this appointment is kind of curious. But Gregory, the sitting cardinal, is a heretic's heretic. He is an outspoken critic of the traditional mass. When Traditionis Custodes came down, he was one of the fastest responders to crushing the traditional Mass in his diocese. Now, that issue is not one so obvious as an illustration of the grip the modernist heresy has on the church for many Catholics, many of whom have ever only known the new Mass and find that many traditionalists tend to be too blunt and acerbic in our commentary about things going on in the church. But the James Martin issue is another story altogether. Pastor Jimmy Martin of the Jesuit Church has a long history of gleefully prancing around the church and promoting heresy, and Cardinal McElroy is an outspoken supporter of the James Martin program. So we'll go here to, instead of to the Washington Post to give you some of these details, I'm going to go here to the National Catholic Reporter. If I can find where I put that article. My bad. But the National Catholic Reporter has an article from Cardinal Gregory that is really eye-opening on this. From Cardinal McElroy, rather. He had this to say with this headline: Cardinal McElroy, Catholics have rigorous obligation to accompany the James Martin crowd. This was published February of 2024. I covered the article in depth when it came out, so I'll refrain from repeating myself too much here. But before Francis turned heads with his comments about how there were too many men, we'll say, like James Martin in the hierarchy. Now, he didn't name James Martin when he said that. He said there were too many men who loved the sin that James Martin has an unhealthy interest in for a priest in the Curia. Conservative Catholics celebrated those remarks, which Francis employed with actual vulgarity of a kind that would get me banned on YouTube if I used it. Think of the, I can't even, there's no illusion. He used some shockingly vulgar language in describing the problem. And American conservatives celebrated it. Conservative Catholics everywhere celebrated it. They thought that Francis was finally on their side. And then he made pen pals with James Martin and Sister Janine Gramick of New Ways Ministry, which kind of dispelled all of it and showed that it was just all for show. Cardinal McElroy is an outspoken supporter of the James Martin program. And here it is. Now, McElroy, who is a supporter of the program, is getting one of the highest profile seats in the entire country as we speak. Now, personally, I had him pegged for the Archdiocese of Chicago since Cardinal Supachik's hit retirement age. Maybe, though, the rumors of Bishop Stowe going to Cincinnati are wrong. Maybe he'll go to Chicago instead, since he and McElroy represent the flamboyant future of the church that Francis wants. But here's an excerpt from that article from last February that McElroy himself wrote to give you an idea of the depth of his heretical leanings. And yes, he wrote this himself. And as you will see, he is a very good writer. And that's one of the reasons why that Washington Post cites that he was elevated. He is theologically of a mind with James Martin and Pope Francis. It says the Vatican's decision to allow varying implementations of its recent document on blessings for people in irregular and James Martin pairings is part of a great move towards decentralization in the Catholic Church amid the ongoing Synod on Synodality, said Cardinal Robert McElroy of San Diego. But he blamed animus towards the James Martin crowd among far too many for opposition to the document, and for its critics focusing mostly, he said, on it allowing blessings for those in James Martin's parody of holy matrimony. We've witnessed the reality that bishops of various parts of the world have made rapidly divergent decisions about the acceptability of such blessings in their countries, based substantially on cultural and pastoral factors as well as neocolonialism, said McElroy in a February 16th talk at the LA Rec. Diabolical thing. McElroy, who was served as delegate in last October's month-long synod gathering, was referring to fiducia supplicans on the pastoral meaning of blessings. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith's December 2023 document outlines the possibility of informal, non-liturgical blessings for Catholics in irregular or James Martin pairings. Such decentralization, McElroy said, must not obscure the rigorous obligation of the Church everywhere to protect the James Martin crowd and accompany those who are divorced or remarried without an annulment. And it goes on. But you may have noticed what he was talking about there wasn't so much fiducia supplicans. He focused on the decentralization of the church as the main thrust of synodality. What we've been saying for the last year about the synod, that it was about decentralizing decision-making on doctrine, dogma, and morality away from Rome and into the hands of the local bishops, and especially into the hands of the laity. There you see the issues of the James Martin sin tied in separately from synodality as a matter of process. It was there, out in the open for the whole world to see. And it only took until the summer for people to really realize that this was about process, even though Cardinal McElroy put that there himself. Now, it's worth noting, a couple of months ago, Cardinal Supach, Cardinal McElroy, and Cardinal Tobin met with Francis It was a closed-door meeting that was apparently not even on the schedule, but the Vatican posted pictures of it on social media to let everybody know what was going on. And it came out afterwards that the entire purpose of that meeting, which happened, I believe, just after the election in America, was to was about having bishops appointed who were more open-minded to synodality and to Francis's so-called reform program. My suspicion was it was at that time that McElroy was told that he was going to be the Cardinal Archbishop of Washington, that he just needed to keep it close to the chest for a while. But that was when that was happening. Now, again, he is 71, meaning in 2028 or 2029, he will hit the mandatory retirement age. But he's also in good health, by all reports. So if Francis is still around in 2028, you can expect McElroy to stay on until a suitable replacement is found, or barring that, till a better pope comes along, if that happens anytime soon. Now, The Pillar confirmed this story, unfortunately, but they added a twist to it. Yes, McElroy is getting the post, but he's getting it explicitly because of how the election turned out 2 months ago. So we go now to The Pillar, who put this out last night. With the headline, confirmed Vatican Cardinal McElroy to be appointed Washington Archbishop. This is about politics. And they sprinkle what they have to say throughout, so I just synthesized it, quoting them directly into one short paragraph here. But this is what this is about. This is about politics. Quote, "The Pillar has previously reported that following a meeting in October in which McElroy joined Cardinals Blaise Cupich of Chicago and Joseph Tobin of Newark to meet with Pope Francis during the Synod on Synodality in October, Francis was said to have decided against appointing McElroy. Instead, Francis tasked former Washington Archbishop Cardinal Donald Wuerl to identify a suitable candidate. Wuerl sources close to the process have confirmed to The Pillar suggested Bishop Sean McKnight of Jefferson City, with Cardinal Gregory also signing off on the recommendation. However, in the weeks of following the presidential election result, which saw the incoming president reelected to the White House, Francis agreed to revisit McElroy's candidacy. As Bishop of San Diego and as a cardinal, McElroy has been outspoken on various subjects touching the political area, most especially new arrivals, we'll say. In addition to the political sensitivities of the role, McElroy will also assume leadership of more than 500,000 Catholics in the D.C. area and Southern Maryland, becoming their third archbishop since 2018." End quote. The reason they've had three archbishops since 2018 is because, McCarrick was one of those archbishops. But put into this context, with the age of McElroy and his outspoken nature on the incoming president's, can only describe it as a landmark issue, plus his friendliness to all things James Martin, you see why he was appointed. He may be there only until 2029 and then replaced by somebody far younger. And that is if Francis does what we expect. But this is all politics. This is about secular politics. There's another thing happening. Some people have talked about this on social media, but I don't know if anybody's made videos or written long, lengthy articles. The outgoing American president, the super duper Catholic, so pious Joe Biden, is going to meet with Pope Francis in the Vatican like this week. He's going to be gone from the White House in 2 weeks, but he's meeting with him this week. Why? What possibly could be so important for him to meet with him? Politics. That's what this is. It's Cardinal McElroy. Probably is going to be tasked with the job of making sure Catholics don't support whoever follows 47. Because this is all politics. The party of Moloch has relied on Catholic support to the point where it is the one religious group consistently spoken about. Evangelicals to a lesser degree, but Catholics especially, because there are like 70 million of us in this country. Depending how you count us. But there are 70 million Catholics. And how Catholics vote always is important. Cardinal McElroy is going to be sitting there, I guarantee you, with every little thing the incoming president does, to frame it as a violation of what the church teaches, to try to get Catholics to turn against him and to turn against the movement that he is just the face of, because it's going to outlive him. It's going to outlast his presidency. That's why people think his vice president is probably going to be the next one. That's what McElroy's task is. And it doesn't hurt at all that he gets the stamp of Jesuit approval, because the Jesuits have been the tip of the spear for changing the church's morality and teachings of morality on all things about that sin that James Martin has a far too unhealthy interest in. Cardinal McElroy has been one of the leading organizers, because he was the bishop of San Diego and has been for some time, of the LA Rec. Okay. The LA Religious Education Conference is this hyper-modernist, progressive group hug fest that is a hotbed of heresy and has been for a very long time. I'm a little surprised that he's making his way to Washington, D.C., but in hindsight, and once you actually put all the pieces together, it actually makes sense. There's an ongoing rumor that Bishop Stowe is going to move from his diocese to Cincinnati, which needs an archbishop. And there was a archbishop that went on an internet tirade yesterday or over the weekend that I expect could possibly be on the list for Chicago or New York. Francis is going to remake the American episcopate without question. Dolan hits retirement age. Don't be shocked if his acceptance is accepted within a week. And once a suitably modernist enough bishop is found to replace Supich, he'll be replaced too with somebody far younger. Because the church in America is, for whatever reason, a stumbling block for synodality, for the imposition of a new synodal church. But it's also a stumbling block for the secular allies of Francis who are on the ropes right now, having lost some not just political contests, they've lost the confidence in people. People are paying attention to them and realizing that what they're doing to the world is evil. And they want no part of it. And that is what the politics comes into here. That is why the very super Catholic outgoing president is going to be meeting with Francis. It's absolutely ridiculous. Margaret says, Canadian politics is crumbling, but it needs to so we can get an election. Probably is a lot of damage to get done to Canadians at least once per week. Yeah. I always tell Americans it could always be worse. Go look at what's happening in Canada. And remember, that piece from McElroy tells you everything. Again, Cardinal Supich, McElroy, and Tobin met with Francis. I actually think he was offered the job then. But those three cardinals met with Francis, and it was about finding bishops to fill all the many vacancies for bishops in the United States who are actually on Team Francis when it comes to synodality and the imposition of this new synodal church. That's what that was about. And he saw that in that article from February of last year that McElroy himself wrote. We talked about fiducia supplicans and how it was perfectly emblematic of the need to decentralize the authority of the church on moral decision-making. Not because he disagreed with Fernandez, but because he disagreed with the resistance to it. There was a need to decentralize these things. That's what he said. Gives the game away. This is about synodality and the alliance between the Catholic Church, we'll put in quotes, and the secular authorities. The new synodal church will have a James Martin face, and it's going to be roommates with the wicked people who run everything in the world right now. That is where this is going, and that's the point of it. I'm going to take a look here in the live chat before we wrap this up today. Marcel says, should we really worry about the modernist moves in the church? Let them take the synodal church over the edge. TLM will be the only foundation left standing. Well, sure, except that 99% of Catholics will be synodalist and won't have much choice in the matter. Yeah, so you should worry about it. Most people will think this is the Catholic Church, what that they're saying, when really it's the false church of prophecy, the ape of the church that Fulton Sheen and Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich and a whole host of other mystics throughout the ages warned was going to come before the chastisement, was this false church that Fulton Sheen called the ape of the church, which would look like the Catholic Church, but would be emptied of its divine content. It would be preaching a false gospel, and that the real Catholic Church would be underground for a time. What role will Gregory play? Well, he's retiring. He's 2 years past age of retirement. He can participate in the conclave when it comes until he's 80 anyway, but that's only a couple of years from now. He's going to retire. Thing is, have Catholics lost belief in the progressive prelates? No, they haven't. That's the thing. Catholics may have supported the once and incoming president, but when you look at what the data shows, consistently what Catholics believe, they reject Humanae Vitae. They reject the church's teaching on the James Martin sin. They reject the church's teaching on divorce. They reject the teachings of the church on things that are infallibly declared. You didn't need Paul VI to invoke papal infallibility in Humanae Vitae because it's been the constant teaching of the Church since the Didache, the first catechism of the Church in the 1st century. This is about politics, and it's about synodality, the imposition of synodality on the U.S. bishops. That's what it's about. So buckle up, folks. Things are going to get interesting with Cardinal McElroy becoming the 2nd or 3rd most powerful bishop in the country, perhaps the most powerful if you factor in politics, because there's a reason that Ted McCarrick was the Cardinal Archbishop of Washington, D.C. Not that long ago. What do we do if we only have access to the ape of the church? You and I have spoken privately about that, Flying Tiger. So, drive the distance if you have to, if you can. If the sacraments remain valid, you can make use of them, I guess. But it's not an easy position to be in. All right, folks. Thanks very much today for tuning in. Please pray for everybody involved, including Cardinal McElroy. He's going to need it. Marcel says most Catholics don't believe in Catholic things anyway. Let the synodal storm sweep them away. Souls are at stake. That's why I can't join in on that. Anyway, I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.